Good evening, I'm Kenroy Batiste, and welcome to this special live presentation of the Communal Cooperative Credit Union, a mini-series via Zoom dubbed Development Agenda 2020 Post-COVID-19 Impact and Opportunities. Joining us are Lydia Courtney-Francis, General Manager of the Communal Cooperative Credit Union, and Josh Hector, Counselling Psychologist at Optimal Solutions. So good to see both of you. Hello.
Good evening, Kenroy.
Yes, thank you so very much.
Hello and good evening, Kenroy.
Indeed. Lydia Courtney-Francis will introduce the series, but before she does, let's tell you a bit about who she is. She joined the team at the Communal Cooperative Credit Union in January 2018. She is an experienced professional who has an MBA in Financial Services from the University of East London and is a fellow of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, FCCA. Mrs. Courtney-Francis is Grenadian, and she has worked in Grenada, the Caribbean, and the UK. She has several years of managerial experience, having worked in the telecommunications sector for almost 30 years, where she held, in fact, a number of positions, including Regional Head of Business Controls, Chief Financial Officer and Company Secretary, and Acting Chief Executive Officer on several occasions. She was also a member of the company's Regional Capital Expenditure Approvals Board and managed multi-million US dollar P&Ls throughout her career. She's very passionate about volunteerism and serving people in general. In the past, she served on the executives of the Grenada Netball Association, Friends of the Earth International, and Optimist International Grenada chapter. She's currently a director of Psychosocial Imaging Center. Now, as a credit union member, she is very enthusiastic about the success of the communal and the credit union sector as a whole. She previously served for several years on the board of directors of the communal, which she now manages, and was its first female president. Welcome again, Mrs. Courtney-Francis. You know, it seems like you've been at the communal for such a long time.
Good night, Kenroy, and good night to Grenada. Thank you, Kenroy, and it's a pleasure to be here. Yes, time does go by quickly, I suppose, but it has just been a little over 2 years since I joined the communal family.
Okay, so help us to understand the genesis of this mini-series.
First of all, let me bring some warm greetings to everyone listening us, wherever you are in Grenada and in the diaspora, from our communal family. Just over a year ago, as you would recall, our credit union established its small business center at Grandans. We all know that Grandans is fast becoming the business hub of Grenada. This center was designed to support our small business members and prospective members to become successful at their craft. Of course, part of our objectives was also geared towards rural diversification, small business enterprises, and initiatives like that. But with the advent of COVID-19, this has just brought so many issues to the fore. And therefore, we start to plan and execute this mini-series that will awaken the spirit of resilience in Grenadians and place squarely on the table the urgent need to hasten financing and business development support that we see that is so gravely needed to rejuvenate Grenada on a whole, but rural in particular. So, I want to say what we are doing tonight finds resonance with the government and the FAO National Land Bank project, which is being finalized to offer lands to the landless. You know, we hope that will be at a lease rate that allows prospective farmers to secure assistance for farm input and to help in the procuring of some markets. So I want to say tonight that, this is not in isolation. This is all linked up with some of the objectives we're going to discuss later of Grenada on the whole.
All right, very well. Tell us now about this national conversation we're having.
Yes, and it is a national conversation. It is a national conversation. Tonight, I'm here just to introduce this interesting and thought-provoking series that we anticipate here in Grenada. Bearing in mind the scars that COVID-19 could likely create on our populace, we decided to host this mini-series which will look at post-COVID impact and opportunities. That's the headline of the series, essentially. And tonight, we will start the discussion with the psychosocial element as we seek to invite our people to overcome adversity and to really begin instead to look to hope and to look to opportunity with what is currently possible. We know this is happening all across the world, so we don't want to be comparing ourselves with others. We want to look at the Grenada situation specifically. So this series is going to happen over the next 4 nights. And tonight, Josh Hector will speak to us on this psychosocial impact, as I said. Tomorrow night, Tuesday, 23rd June, we take a rural perspective. We're going to be talking about how can we extract beauty from the ashes. And of course, we'll have Dr. Dunstan Campbell and Dr. Stephen Fletcher to speak to us on that. And of course, we can't do this without looking at the economic perspective. And we can't do this either without having government involvement. So we are very pleased that on the 3rd night, Wednesday night, we'll have Honorable Oliver Joseph and Stefan Benjamin of the GIDC. And of course, Thursday is the grand finale. Grenada, the way forward post-COVID-19. And we're going to have a very own son of the soil, Dr. Nicholas Earl Graffett, to speak with us on Thursday night. So we look forward to the series and the excitement and most of the discussion it will generate and what we will take from it.
All right. Well, definitely applause on the panel the communal has put together for this mini-series. Let me ask you this. What are some of the outcomes the communal expects from this mini-series?
Kenra, before I answer that, I would want to kind of either paraphrase or rephrase what you said. We want people to understand that communal is hosting this series. So maybe the question really should be, what are some of the outcomes for Grenada that we can expect for this series? Because this is a national discussion in which we want people to really participate. But to speak specifically about the outcomes, this feeling of loss is so prevalent in Grenada. We want people to think about recovery, about restoration, about prosperity. You know, something we understand, we often say, if we speak what we want, more than likely we will get what we want. So we want people to speak positive. We understand we cannot do better if we cannot think better. And I'm sure our psychologist will elaborate on that later. So there's a heavy psychological push, psychosocial push to that we want to induce. Hence the reason why we're starting tonight with psychological. We want to start it because we want to set people's minds, the frame of mind. And I want to let everyone listening to know that we're not doing this in isolation, as I said earlier. It is dovetail into what the approach of the National Agricultural Plan 2015-2030 and with the government's poverty reduction strategy, which includes, and which we also endorse, I'll just go through a few of those, increasing employment and income levels in rural areas, particularly rural areas. But through agricultural as well as non-agricultural activity. And by supporting the adoption of the climate smart agricultural practices, all of those things. So you may ask, well, what are some activities we would target? The poor people who live in these rural areas. Well, of course, we want to put a special focus on youth, because we want to see youth becoming involved in agriculture, modern agriculture. So some of the key activities will be increasing the agricultural production and exports, strengthening the linkages between agriculture and tourism. You know, we should really be thinking about enhancing food security by reducing this import bill, you know. We should think about strengthening resilience and improving the preparedness to address climate impacts and those extreme events, you know. Investment in infrastructure and, you know, the human capital, we can't, you know, move away from that, because human resource capacity development is key to the development of our country. So there's also the unique opportunity for partnerships. I don't think there's any one organization, or if it's government alone, or whoever we choose to look at it, that can achieve this. So while we initiate this conversation, we expect to see a partnership of businesses across the country, and Communal is willing to do its part, you know, as part of nation building, and also given it as part of our agenda to really look into the rural community and see how we can extract some beauty from the ashes.
So post-series, what can we expect?
Of course, we've set up a planning group already, and we will examine the presentation of all these expert speakers, because we will be looking through this for viable ideas and suggestions which we will consider for follow-up. I mean, all institutions, as I said, should be prepared to contribute to the development of Grenada, because no one party can do it alone. And of course, we have aspirations at Communal to follow the outcomes of this series, including what the government will be rolling out post-COVID from all the strategic working groups that we know the government have. Communal looks forward to be a partner as a financial institution through which agricultural funding can be leveraged, and to ensure farmers receive not only financial support, but the institutional strengthening as well, training where training can happen. Because in order to support all of this would be our business incubator that comes as part of the Grandlands Business Center, as well as some structures we'll be putting in place, you know, to support our own small business customers, which will extend to anything coming out of this group, I must say. And of course, you know, we always have to publish success. So any project coming out of this that is successful and can be attributed to the series, or at least, you know, was both out of this, we want to follow it. But I can tell you that definitely, Communal will look for at least one project, one initiative, one whatever you want to call it, that will come out of this series. And I'm sure there will be many. And we're very, very excited about that.
All right. Very well. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lydia Courtney-Francis, General Manager of the Communal Cooperative Credit Union. Reminding you, this is a live mini-series via Zoom dubbed Development Agenda 2020, Post-COVID-19 Impact and Opportunities. We want to let you know that, of course, this presentation is live, of course, on the Grenada Broadcasting Network, K105, Hot FM, as well as the Facebook page of the Grenada Broadcasting Network. Also on Vibes FM, Real FM, Sister Isle Radio, Boss FM, Our Nation, Mikey Live, GIS, and now Grenada. There will also be a rebroadcast on MTV and WeFM. All right, we're taking a break for now. More to come. Stay close.
Experience life with your Communal Visa International Debit Card. Enjoy the benefits of hassle-free and stress-free shopping at your favorite restaurants or stores. Access your money 24 hours through the ATM anywhere in the world. Your Communal Visa International Debit Card is simpler, faster, and the most secured way of doing business. Your life, your card. Get the Communal Visa International Debit Card experience. The Communal Cooperative Credit Union. To grow with us, save with us.
Welcome back to this special live presentation by the Communal Cooperative Credit Union, a mini-series via Zoom dubbed Development Agenda 2020, Post-COVID-19 Impact and Opportunities. This mini-series will end on Thursday, the 25th day of June 2020. Run from 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. each day on the Grenada Broadcasting Network, GBN, simultaneously on all radio stations, all radio and TV stations, for the most part in Grenada. The initiative is also being streamed online by way of non-traditional media platforms. This is a national conversation, and so you too will have the opportunity to chime in with your questions and comments. Now, our first speaker is Josh Hector. Let's find out a bit about who he is. He holds a master's degree in counseling psychology from the University of the West Indies, Cayville. He is the counseling psychologist at Optimal Solutions and a part-time lecturer at St. George's University. At present, he is pursuing his doctorate in clinical psychology at California Southern University. Additionally, Josh Hector is the treasurer of the Grenada Psychological Association and an executive member of the Caribbean Alliance of National Psychological Associations, CANPA. He joins us as usual, and has been the case via Zoom, to talk the psychosocial perspective. Josh, good evening once more, and thank you for being part of the mini-series. Yes, the psychosocial perspective.
Yes. So I'll just jump right into this, and let me also say, in addition to good evening, Kenra, good evening to all our listeners across the nation, online, via radio, via television, and so on. When we talk about psychosocial, what we're actually doing is combining two things. So on one end, we have the psychological factors, and then we have the social environmental factors that actually combine to influence behavior, also influences our physical and mental wellness, ultimately determines how we function. And if we look at this in context of Grenada, we have had the past few months have been actually quite interesting, because socially we can see that we've begun to operate differently. We actually, there's something that I find interesting. Just as I was standing in the supermarket one day, could have been some weeks ago, I noticed that everyone was very suspicious of the other, right? Each person was suspicious. They didn't want people to necessarily come close to them, while they themselves would have been sure that they don't have COVID-19. You know, so there would have been a general suspicion and a concern, fear even. And at the center of this, though, we cannot get away from this fact that COVID-19 has actually affected a global change, or global changes rather. So the thing is, as we look at it, I actually pulled out some definitions of change, and the main definition, as we see it, a shift from one thing to the other, or a shift from one season to the other. I like one season to the other because seasonal change suggests that change is inevitable, it is continuous. But amidst the change, there's something that has to take place, and that is adjustment, right? Adjustment, because if adjustment does not take place, it means that we will not function as we should moving forward. And the adjustment we're actually here to talk about tonight is the adjustment, the mental adjustment, simply because the body follows the mind. Where the mind leads, the body follows. Where the mind leads, our actions follow. And so, as we look at the change, I ask myself this question: what do we do when change comes in the form of a crisis? But some change is good, some change would be welcomed. But when the change comes in the form of a crisis, truth be told, we actually have to go into crisis management. And in the case of COVID-19 here, what we would have seen is a lot of curative measures, people trying to make up for things they did not prepare for, etc. But, being caught unprepared does not mean that we cannot make a difference, simply because in the midst of employing curative strategies, we can actually prepare for the next eventuality. And I would like us tonight to mentally do so, because I looked at an example I used a few weeks ago in a presentation. I'm actually too young to have hands-on information about Hurricane Janet, but I know what a Janet house is. And I would have used a Janet house in one of my presentations. Now, some of the older folks said, oh, that's a Janet house. But the question is, what happened between Janet and Hurricane Ivan? Right? What happened between Janet and Hurricane Ivan? So the Janet house is the cure. It would have been the cure at that point in time. Some houses needed to be built. But between Janet and Hurricane Ivan, we realized that persons actually forgot about the idea of a hurricane. We heard things like God is a Grenadian, and so hurricanes don't come here. So when Ivan came around, we were actually surprised somewhat. Some people wanted Ivan to happen because they never saw a hurricane before. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this that now, as we mentally, as we psychologically begin to cure this circumstance, it is important for us to be mindful that it is not the final rodeo. And so in order to build resilience moving forward, it would be important for us to not just employ short-term strategies to cure, but to employ continuous and ongoing preventive strategies, so that in the future we're not surprised. But if I delve into the psychological impact of COVID-19 moving forward, what we see is actually what I would call a secondary pandemic, meaning that in addition to COVID-19, there is an issues, but as it relates to this pandemic I'm speaking of in particular, it is quite pervasive, and that is stress. Now, a bunch of problems with stress at the base of those issues. And we can't talk about it without talking about stress. Stress is a state of being. Stress is a natural reaction to real or perceived threats or demands. And this reaction is physical, it's emotional, and it could result in behavior, of course. On the physical side of it, we have a situation where when we experience stress, we have stress hormones being secreted in our brains. The stress hormones cortisol, and then you have another stress hormone called corticosteroid. They're actually being secreted in our brains. Now, in the short term, this may provide an opportunity for us to relax, because stress has a good side. That the side of stress that is good, the beneficial side would result in a slowing down, a relaxation if we're going too much, or if we're not doing enough, then we would be pushed by stress, for example, in the case of an impending deadline. The challenge, though, is when stress is ongoing. When we have flooding of these stress hormones in the brain, particularly the corticosteroid, what can actually happen is the immune system can be hampered. So, for example, being stressed about the possibility of contracting a virus can actually, if we are stressed for long enough, weaken our immune systems and actually make us vulnerable to the virus, because then it actually suppresses our white blood cells and so on. That is a significant downside of stress that is unmanaged. On the physical side, now, on the emotional side of it, we actually would have a situation where people would be experiencing depressed moods. So depressed mood, fear, worry, even panic sometimes. And panic is actually a heightened state of stress. But having a depressed mood momentarily does not mean that a person is actually clinically depressed. It does not automatically warrant a diagnosis of depression. The issue is with this depressed mood is that if it persists, then you can have further issues, further mental health issues, depression and anxiety-related disorders and so on. So the idea in the midst of this is to manage our stress. And a bit later, as I continue speaking, we will talk about ways that we can actually manage our stress. But panic, which is a heightened state of stress, panic that can result from stress unresolved, is actually quite problematic, particularly in this time. Now, the interesting thing about panic is that it is very contagious. And we would have seen this, although we have calmed down now a bit, we would have seen this, for example, following the news from, let's say, the foreign news networks, where we saw people binge shopping. We actually had a period of doing so ourselves, not because there was a particular threat, not because we were running out of food, but because people panicked, and panic is contagious. So if I see my neighbor buying everything in the supermarket, I'm going to rush in to see what I could get as well in the midst of that. While we have actually toned down on this, it is important for us to recognize the impact of what I would call binging on news related to the coronavirus. Because what we will be doing in such an instance is actually bombarding our minds with a negative narrative. Life in itself, it's stressful, but what we do not need at this point in time is to sit and feed ourselves morning, noon, and night on negative messages. No, it's okay to actually find out what is going on out there. That is a bit different. But if we binge on corona-related news, COVID-related news, what it will do is actually leave us in a position where we can spiral negatively, and the state of the mind. I heard earlier a mention of thinking or speaking about what we want rather than what we don't want. That is actually quite useful in this time. Because the last thing you want to have is a negative outlook that only breeds more negativity. That can also hinder you from seeing the positive in life. And this, particularly coming from the isolation as well, which some people would have experienced, that is by way of the what a lot of people were calling the quarantine, right? Although I don't think the average person would have been quarantined. It is just a case where we were physically distancing ourselves. I refrain from saying social distancing, because even with physical distance, we also have the opportunity to interact. We have the opportunity to still reach out by different mediums and so on. But for some persons, it would have been a case where that distance isolated them. And in this isolation, actually, depression and those mood disorders thrive in isolation, because a person who is stressed, who is not expressing themselves to another person, who is not venting, will have a situation where it's them and the stress. And if they're in isolation, the truth is the stress can only get worse. The stress can only worsen until it results in complications. And those complications go beyond being emotional, simply because there are persons who experience symptoms in their physical bodies, and they are certain that the symptoms stem from a condition of physical origin. And then they get to the doctor, and the doctor checks them out, and the doctor realizes that actually there is no physical origin, but this person is experiencing stress. I'm talking about situations like extreme headaches, shortness of breath, heart palpitations, dizziness, fatigue. All these symptoms while they can actually have a physical origin at times, but stress looks like that as well. And so in this time, it is important for us to manage our stress. If not, we are not going to be as effective as we should. And I present a few tips on stress management, but also, and I like to bunch that with resilience as well, because we ultimately manage stress for the sake of resilience. So right on top of the list, I actually like to address, first of all, what is happening internally, the internal mind, the thought pattern, whether I am thinking negatively or positively. Because when we think about psychosocial, right, we have psychological, we have social. Now, if we can actually, from a psychological point of view, find ourselves in a situation where we manage our internal world, it then impacts how we interact with what's happening socially. Because the social change, the social disruption is, right now, it is actually outside of our control. We can't control it. What we can control, however, is our perspective on it. I read a story a while ago, I think I heard a story a while ago about two gentlemen who lived on the same street but opposite each other. And one of them had a very dirty window. The other had a clean window. The one with the dirty window would look outside every morning and say to himself, "No, it's filthy out there. I'm not going out there. It's totally disgusting." He would see his neighbor walking about outside and wonder, why is he out there? It's so filthy. The window I'm talking about here is actually a perspective. And the way we look at things can actually ultimately determine how we see them. Change is based on perspective, right? And based on our perspective, we can advance or we can actually regress. But as it relates to managing the stress, because this is particularly important, what we want to do is self-care. And I'm not talking about the type of self-care that, I don't mean a day at the spa, because of course at a time like this, there are some pleasures that people are foregoing in the interest of saving more and so on. But I'm talking about really looking after yourself first and foremost. My heart goes out to the people who are parents right now, those who have young children or people in their care right now. While the knee-jerk reaction may be to look after those in your care with automatically without thinking about your own self, it is actually important, and the best way to take care of others is to first take care of yourself. Because if you're not okay, you cannot take care of them. Additionally, I often ask this question, do you exercise? Although exercising is becoming a trend at this time, it is important for us to exercise, because if I go back to the discussion on the stress hormone that is secreted when we experience stress, exercise actually counters that. Exercise produces that sense of euphoria that is going to actually counter our stress. Learning to say no is a big thing. No human being is the savior of the world, because we're talking about stress management here. If you are unable to say no, particularly at a time like this, if you are still 100% available whenever people call, that is going to impact your stress level as well, because you are giving and giving and giving, and when do you get replenished? Additionally, there is this issue of deep breathing, which a lot of people overlook. Just actually taking a deep breath. It's powerful. If you sit now, perhaps you're thinking about a million things. If you sit now and you pause, you sit upright, and you take a deep breath, you would notice that instantly you're going to see the benefits of that. And if you take a few deep breaths, this actually counters stress. Additionally, you want to be able to rest and relax. I don't mean sit down, I don't mean lie down, because we could do those things without relaxing, but I mean sign off.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We're coming up to a break. We're coming up to a break, Josh. We have to take a break. If you're just tuning in to this live presentation, we just heard there, of course, from Josh Hector, counseling psychologist at Optimal Solutions, on the psychosocial perspective. When we return, we will continue the conversation, and of course, you too can chime in, all part of this dialogue. Feel free to do so with your questions and comments. So we'll see you after the break. Stay with us.
We are adapting to meet the changing needs of our shareholders and members. Times are changing, and with the changing times comes a whole new way to do business. Our parents may have done their banking a different way. Communal's state-of-the-art online banking and international debit card allows members to do business with great ease. It's like literally having a branch in your very own hands. Need a loan? Apply online from the comfort of your own home anywhere in the world, and your request will be dealt with remotely. Want to transfer between your accounts or another shareholder? No wait time for transactions to update. Voila! Who needs receipts when you can receive them via e-statements on your mobile device and save the environment? Not a communal member? You can join our family today by applying online. At Communal, we see you working hard to ensure that you save, invest, and grow. Communal. Join us today. This will be the best financial decision you have ever made.
if you're just tuning in, this is a special live presentation by the Communal Cooperative Credit Union, a mini-series via Zoom dubbed Development Agenda 2020, Post-COVID-19 Impact and Opportunities. A while ago, we heard the Psychosocial Perspective by Josh Hector, Counselling Psychologist at Optimal Solutions. We invite you now to participate in this national conversation. Feel free to chime in with your questions and or comments. You can call 440-1252. We'll also accept your feedback via social media. Of course, the Facebook page of the Grenada Broadcasting Network, GBN Television specifically, as well, of course, live on YouTube, GBN's YouTube channel. So feel free to get your questions in so we can, of course, facilitate your feedback on this very important issue, the psychosocial perspective. Josh, welcome back to the dialogue. Josh, earlier, you've said quite a lot, and I want you to pick up on some things to bring some clarity, even before we accept some calls. Mind you, we are taking calls, we're taking feedback, so go ahead and give us a call, 440-1252, and of course, we'll include you as part of this conversation. But Josh, change is sometimes difficult for some people. Why do you think that is?
Well, because we are creatures of habit, first of all. And you would see this playing out in a situation. For example, you give somebody a ride and you have to drop them in a place that you're not accustomed stopping on your commute. And they have to say, oh, don't forget me. Simply because we like what we're accustomed to. And so change is not readily accepted a lot of the time. And it's just that, familiarity for some people is everything. So anything that is different, it's going to be challenging for them to adjust. But adjusting is actually the thing that is going to help us cope with whatever that change is.
Adjusting. And how do you propose we adjust to changes coming our way?
Mentally, first of all, by first accepting that change is a part of life. Because minus that acceptance, we are going to be resistant. And in a case like this, we have COVID-19 on our hands. If we actually do not adjust, we would find ourselves stuck. And so mentally, we have to first accept. And the acceptance is then going to empower us to make the necessary changes.
Okay, we have a caller online. Good evening, welcome to this special presentation. Hello, thanks for joining us. All right, we'll come back. Welcome to this special presentation of the Communal Cooperative Credit Union, the Psychosocial Perspective.
I'm not hearing.
We are hearing you. Can you hear me now?
Hello, good night.
Yes. Hello, welcome.
I'm not hearing you clearly at all, Mr. Kenroy.
Okay, so we will come.
I'm hearing you better now.
Okay, you heard me better now.
Yeah.
Great. Go ahead with your contribution.
Yeah, good night, Mr. Kenroy Baptiste, and good night to your guest, Mr. Josh Hector. I want to commend the Communal Cooperative Credit Union for this great initiative. I'm a proud member of the Communal Cooperative Credit Union, and so I am super excited that they are having a program like this. But unfortunately, though, I did not hear everything that Mr. Josh Hector said, because I got a call while he was speaking, and so I missed out on most of the things that he would have said. But what I want to say is that I personally have been experiencing a lot of stress, not related to COVID at all, I must say that, not related to COVID directly, but other stress. And how I'm able to cope with it is because I am a Christian, and that makes the difference. Because I put my trust in God, and even though we are going through this COVID right now, which is a really, really terrible thing, I put my trust in God. And so whatever stresses that have been going through, I am able to lean on the everlasting arm of Jesus Christ. And this has been helping me a lot. As a matter of fact, I have told a couple of people, a couple of persons that this pandemic or this shutdown, I am more blessed now more than ever. I am experiencing the favor and the mercy and the grace of God now more than ever. Okay. And it is a fact. So I want to say to people out there, yes, Mr. Josh Hector would have given you some counseling advice as to how to cope, but without the spiritual aspect, you might not be able to cope as you should. So
Thank you.
Do not leave out the spiritual aspect.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, caller. Thank you so much for your contribution. You know, Josh, the caller mentioned her stress was not related to COVID-19, but I want to ask, though, could COVID-19 have exacerbated the situation for her?
Well, definitely, simply because, as I said earlier, life is, in and of itself, minus our health, it's a stressful undertaking. And I like to share the example of the fact that life is stressful from birth. If a baby could remember what it was like being born, they would probably say they don't ever want to do that again, right? And so from right out the gate, life is stressful. As we proceed, as we advance, and the thing is, all these unforeseen events, what they do is actually compile the problem of stress. But the reality is stress, and its origin doesn't really matter. What matters is how we approach dealing with and managing that stress.
Right. I want us to go back to how can we adjust to change. You started to talk a bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, like I said, we started with acceptance. No, the thing about adjusting to change, beyond acceptance and beyond doing things in the here and now to actually deal or cope with the change.
Okay.
I've mentioned that it is important for us to prepare for the next event. The thing about seasons, for example, it's when the rain is falling or when we have water, for example, we can actually prepare for when we don't by storing water. And so I actually want us to approach dealing with this change not as something that we do immediately, but something that we do in an ongoing manner, so that we constantly regulate.
Okay, follow. We have a caller online. Welcome to this special live presentation. You're live.
Good evening. I've been listening to the program, and I think this is really a great initiative. And I think, are you hearing me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, I forgot to say good evening to everyone. But yes, I think this is very interesting, and I've with an interest in the psychological aspect of COVID on the world. I feel that the communal initiatives have taken a very great initiative in enlightening the people of Grenada on what's actually going on. But what impressed me is when you talked about the immune system and what has happened to the people of Grenada. I wish you would be able to explain to them what the immune system is all about and how it affects us as a people. It affects how the input of the stress has affected our immune system.
Okay. All right, caller. Thank you so much. So,
all right.
The immune system of this?
Right. I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't try to go too far into that realm. But the immune system, as we know, basically, this is our body's internal defense. And when we experience stress, as I mentioned earlier, the stress hormones that are secreted, if they are secreted in abundance, meaning that the stress is not managed and the stress persists, once our brains are flooded with that stress hormone, what happens is that it can ultimately hamper our immune system and actually cause it harder for us to fight off diseases and infections and so on. So the idea is really and truly to make sure that we manage that stress to stop that internal battle.
What sort of mindset shift needs to happen to process change?
Well, the mind, and I think I shared this proverb with you before, an old Turkish proverb that says the fish rots from the head first. Really and truly, Kenroy, our minds are powerful. We have these powerful tools at our disposal. If we are constantly negative, if we can only see the downside, it means that we're not using this tool to our advantage. So in terms of shifting, primarily it would be about actually now changing our thought habit and actually begin to see the positive side, begin to be hopeful, to be positive, to remind ourselves that we have what it takes to overcome. If not, we are going to actually have problems. Now, brain research actually indicates that the average person would think between somewhere like 70 and 90,000 thoughts in a day. But can you imagine repeating thousands of negative thoughts every single day? What that is actually self-sabotage.
Okay, right. A panic attack, one of the areas you spoke about earlier, and you in fact linked that to worry, frustration, all of that. How can a person though deal with a panic attack in a time like this?
Right, so panic attacks, while they can originate from heightened stress, there may also be some physical issues associated as well. So my first recommendation is that a person who is experiencing panic attacks see a medical doctor to either confirm or rule out any physical origin. Panic attacks actually occur without warning. It's just a sudden surge of fear and discomfort. And you have symptoms such as a choking sensation, sweating, heart palpitations, fear of losing control, fear of dying, etc. Interestingly, there are many people who have repeat panic attacks simply because after having the first one, they become so afraid of having another that the panic attack in itself stresses them into experiencing another panic attack. But for persons who are actually experiencing this, one method is to help them normalize bodily activities. So for example, if you walk up a hill, you are going to begin breathing quickly, breathing faster than before. Your heart is going to race a bit more than before. But what happens is that persons who experience panic attacks often associate these bodily activities with panic attacks. So it's really about normalizing them, because you have people who experience panic attacks and they do things like avoid physical activity because they just don't want their hearts to race. They don't want their breathing rates to increase. And it's really important to normalize these things and help them to, rather than avoid, actually confront the fear that they're experiencing.
Josh, when the word change is brought to the fore, there's always, for some people, sinking or staying afloat. That sort of perspective comes to mind. What can be done to stay afloat in the midst of change?
You see, I would definitely not give you a straightforward answer to that, because it really depends on the type of change and the kind of change. What would be required in one situation may not be required in another. But particularly at a time like this, and if we tie this into the crux of this initiative as well, is that we are looking at economic resilience, which means that persons now have to begin to look within and actually venture into activities that can yield profit, that can actually provide income. Entrepreneurship, that is the order of the day. And I'm using that to say, depending on the situation would dictate what we do in order to deal with the change at hand. And right now, I think more than ever, people are beginning to recognize the importance of, apart from just looking to work 9 to 5, but they are venturing into activities that can actually yield income.
Okay. Before we go further, a caller has, of course, communicated with us saying that he appreciates the program, this particular live session organized by the Communal Cooperative Credit Union, and according to this caller, this shows that the institution cares for its members. So thank you very much, caller, for your feedback. Josh, change, earlier you said, is based on perspective, right? Very interesting point there. And you went on to say that we can either advance or regress depending on the perspective we have of change.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned that one, particularly because in times like these, it's important for us to maintain a sense of necessity. What do I mean by this? So a crisis is upon us. Typically, we have knee-jerk reactions. We react, and we do what is necessary in the short term. When the crisis begins to subside, we actually find ourselves going back to an old way of operating, which is the reason why we got caught in the first place. And so when I say maintain a sense of necessity, we need to then begin to look at the practices that or the things that we're doing now to deal with that crisis. We need to consider those as things that we should continue doing. For example, maintain a sense of necessity with your saving. If you were caught and you felt like you didn't have enough money at the beginning of this crisis, should a crisis come up again, you should have enough money. Maintain that sense of necessity. Maintain a sense of necessity in terms of taking care of your physical body, in terms of your diet, in terms of exercise, and so on. Always keep those things on your priority list, because those are the things that will actually prepare you for a future situation.
Okay. All right, we have to take a break. We have to take a break at this time. Speaking there, of course, via Zoom with Josh Hector, Counselling Psychologist at Optimal Solutions. All part of a special mini-series, Development Agenda 2020, Post-COVID-19 Impact and Opportunities. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Everyone wants money, don't you? The National Lotteries Authority's Lotto Jackpot is $166,000. Play today for chances at improving your life. Lotto. Play and win a lot of money.
Communal has gone mobile, now available for Android and Apple iOS devices. Communal's online banking mobile app. Download the app from the Google Play Store and the App Store, or visit us online at thecommunalcu.com. The Communal Cooperative Credit Union Limited, a whole new experience.
All right, we're back here. We're live. Special presentation of the Communal Cooperative Credit Union Development Agenda 2020 Post-COVID-19 Impact and Opportunities. Via Zoom is Josh Hector, Counselling Psychologist at Optimal Solutions. Josh, we're on the home stretch to wrap, but I want to ask you this quite literally. What are some ways we can reduce stress?
And I actually have a list. No, I started previously on managing our internal state of mind, because if we do not calm our internal storm, we will not be able to brave the external storms. So that goes back to the positive thinking, the positive outlook, differentiating concern and worry. Because a lot of people worry and they think it's just concern. Worry is actually when we look ahead and we decide on the worst case scenario. It's okay to be concerned, but ensure that we do not find ourselves worrying. Indulge in physical activity, talk it out. Now more than ever, we need to make and or maintain connections. Resilience is largely based on connections. It is not every man for himself. It is based on our ability to connect with each other and support each other. Practice deep breathing, as I mentioned a while ago. Take care of yourself to avoid becoming ineffective. You want to ensure that you take care of yourself first of all. And I'm not talking about being selfish in a negative way, but the fact is if you are completely selfless, it simply means that you are going to be stressed because you will be giving, and not receiving. Right now, it's actually important for us to applaud ourselves, give ourselves a pat on the back when we're doing our best, when we're giving our best, and be able to see our effort, right? Because if we cannot see that we're trying, if we cannot see that we're making progress, it means that we will find ourselves in a situation where all we imagine is a negative outcome. And of course, it's quite okay to seek professional help if it has gotten to a point where you really just don't know how to rein it in. Nothing is wrong with seeking professional help. I myself, I have a therapist, and there's actually nothing wrong with that, because the fact is there comes a point when we need someone who can, an objective bystander, that is, who can look at our situation from the outside, just like the guy who stands over your shoulder while you're playing checkers or chess. You can actually see all the moves that you should make. That is the benefit of seeking professional help.
Okay. All right. You know, you made a very powerful point there when you said resilience is based on connections, because, you know, Josh, there's a tendency for people to withdraw from others when they are stressed. Yeah. Well,
you know, particularly when persons are experiencing depressed moods or even trending toward depression or are actually experiencing depression,
Okay.
they unfortunately avoid doing the things that will help. They actually don't feel like connecting with others. They don't feel like going out. But the trap is remaining where they are is going to compound the problem. Yes, connections are extremely important.
Okay. Final thoughts from you, 15 seconds, as we put a wrap to this conversation this time around.
Yeah, my final thought is going to go back to the idea of maintaining a sense of necessity, just so that we can, in the long run, show that we have learned from this situation, from this pandemic, that we take all the positive practices and habits that we would have developed during this time and continue them as we go through life, because those are the things that will actually keep us afloat, and so we don't have to sink, you know. And as I'm talking about sinking, what comes to mind is the conqueror Hernan Cortez, who got to a place and told his men to burn the ships when they got up, meaning that you're not going to burn your exit. You need to win in order to make it. And we're not talking about burning anything here. We're not inciting anybody to set fires. But when I say burn your exits, you want to be able to see these positive habits that we're learning now, these positive habits that we're actually practicing now. We want to see those as necessity. We want to see those as things that we have to do. We just do not have a choice. We do not have a choice but to save. We do not have a choice but to look after our mental health, our physical health. We do not have a choice but to maintain connections, meaningful connections. These are the things that are going to ultimately ensure that we maintain a healthy state of mind moving forward, generally in life, but also if we encounter any future crises, these are the things that are going to help us through.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so very much, Josh Hector, Counselling Psychologist at Optimal Solutions. Earlier, of course, we had a presentation from Lydia Courtney-Francis, giving an overview of the mini-series. She is the General Manager of the Communal Cooperative Credit Union. Reminding you that Josh presented on the psychosocial aspect of things this time around. But I want to let you know that this is part of a mini-series via Zoom dubbed Development Agenda 2020 Post-COVID-19 Impact and Opportunities. Tomorrow, Tuesday, the 23rd of June, there'll be a perspective on rural development, extracting beauty from the ashes, and we're going to have a conversation with Doctors Dunstan Campbell and Stephen Fletcher. On Wednesday, the 24th, the session continues. We'll have the economic perspective, small businesses, and of course the guests will be Minister Oliver Joseph and Stephen Benjamin of Grenada Investments Development Corporation. And the mini-series will wrap up on Thursday, the 25th of June. The grand finale, Grenada, the way forward post-COVID-19. And a special guest will join us, Dr. Nicholas Earl Brathwaite. And of course, we are likely to see the return of General Manager of the Communal, Lydia Courtney-Francis, for that particular broadcast. So a lot is ahead, all part of this mini-series organized by the Communal Cooperative Credit Union. Plan to join us. We are on 8:30 to 9:30 each day, of course, 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. So feel free to join us. We're on a number of media houses across the nation. Of course, the Grenada Broadcasting Network, GBN. We're also on the Facebook page of GBN Television, plus Classic Radio, K105, well, Classic Radio K105, Hot FM, Vibes FM, Real FM, Sister Isle Radio, Boss FM, Our Nation, Mikey Live, not forgetting GIS, and now Grenada. There's also going to be a rebroadcast of this mini-series on MTV and We FM Radio. That's going to do it from us this time around. Thank you so much for being part of the dialogue. I'm Ken Baptiste. Have a good night. See you soon.